Okay, welcome back in. We'll continue this 32 and 32. Now I will be taking a look at the Cincinnati Bengals. So this past season, as you can see on the screen, they would finish third in the AFC North with a record of 9-8, missing out on the playoffs for the first time in like 3 seasons. I think that the last time they missed it was in Joe Burrow's first year, which would have been in the 2020-21 campaign. So 22, 23, 24, 3 straight years they made the playoffs, and now they have missed out. So we'll take a look at their schedule as always. And again, preseason is absolutely meaningless. And if it did mean something, then that means they were winless in their preseason. So starting things off, they would lose to the Patriots in what was probably one of the biggest upsets of the year. They would then go into Kansas City and lose that game, and go into and at home against Washington, and they would lose that. So they started the season off 0-3. They would finally get their first win against the Carolina Panthers, and then they hosted the Baltimore Ravens week number 5 and dropped to 1-4 at that point. And the crazy thing is I'm pretty sure last year they also started out 1-3 or 1-4, and they ended up going on a crazy run and made the postseason. So a lot of teams thought, well, just because they're 1-4 doesn't mean that they can't finish above 500 by the end of the season. So after the loss to the Ravens, they would go on to win 2 straight games against New York and Cleveland. They would lose to Philadelphia. They would defeat the Raiders. They would lose to Baltimore and the Chargers heading into week number 12. After their bye week, they would go on to lose to Pittsburgh. So at that point, I think they were 4-8. It really wasn't looking that good at that part of the season as to whether or not they would compete or not. They would go on to win 5 straight games against the Cowboys, Titans, Browns, Broncos, and Steelers. So going into week number 18, they needed to win against Pittsburgh, which they did, but they also needed the Denver Broncos to lose. Unfortunately, they won. So Cincinnati was on the outside looking in when it came to the postseason. And the crazy thing is I'm going to be looking at their stats here, especially when it comes to the team stats and individual stats. It's mind-blowing of how good they were offensively. It just goes to show they probably weren't the best on the defensive side of things. So on the AFC North, you can see they were third in that AFC North. Passing, they had the best passing yards. Joe Burrow played unbelievable, and I guarantee had they won a few more games, he would have easily been in the category for MVP. But because he came out with a 9-8 record and they played so poorly, especially the first half of the season, unfortunately, Joe Burrow and MVP were not meant to be. So he finished with 4,640 yards. They would also finish, Cincinnati would finish with the most passing or receiving yards of all 32 teams with 4,918. First downs, they were 7th in the league. They had 108. Rushing yards, they were 30th in the league. So they definitely missed Joe Mixon, to say the least, after he signed with the Texans last year in the offseason. They would finish with 1,574 yards, and points, they were 6th in the league with 472. On the defensive side of things, sacks, they were 26th in the league, 36 on season. For 8th in interceptions, so at least they were in the top 10 in that category. They had 15. Forced fumbles, they were 13th in the league with 14. And tackles, they were 650. They had 659, which was 14th in the entire league. Field goals made, they made 25 field goals, finishing 24th in the season. Field goal percentage, they were 75.8. If I'm not mistaken, I think McPherson did get injured and was out for a good chunk of the year, so that's probably why they struggled on special teams. Extra points made, they made 51 extra points. And for the extra point percentage, they finished with 96.2. So when I look at the individual stats, it will show how many extra points that they missed. So we'll take a look at the individual stats with players. So Joe Burrow would finish, as I said, with 4,918 passing yards. Very impressive. Almost 5,000 passing yards in the season. That's absurd. His completion percentage was 70.55. And this, check that out, his touchdown to interception ratio was 43-9. That is unheard of. Again, easily that could have been MVP numbers, but because the team didn't perform that well, and obviously they missed out on the postseason, he's not even in the talks, which is absurd. If you have less than 10 interceptions and more than 40 touchdowns, you should be in the hunt. Jamar Chase, I know the MVP awards haven't been awarded, but he is the first. He actually got the triple threat. So now he had the most touchdown catches, the most yards, and I believe the most. So the most catches, the most touchdowns, and the most receiving yards. So a very amazing accomplishment for a wide receiver. He would finish with 1,708 yards, 127 receptions, and 17 touchdowns. T. Higgins, basically the number 2 wide receiver, finished shy of 1,000, 911 yards, 73 receptions, and 10 touchdowns. So they both had double digits when it came to that. Chase Brown was just 10 yards shy of 1,000, rushing for 990 on 229 carries, 7 touchdowns as well. Zach Moss, the other running back, would finish with 242 yards on 74 attempts and 2 touchdowns of his own. Trey Hendrickson would finish the year with 17 and a half sacks on the season, 33 tackles, 2 forced fumbles. Jermaine Pratt, the linebacker, would finish with 2 forced fumbles and 2 interceptions. And Geno Smith, the free safety, would finish with 4 interceptions, 47 tackles, and 6 pass deflections. Take a look at the special teams. So Evan McPherson had 16 field goals made, 22 missed, so he did miss 3 field goals. He would finish with a 72.73 field goal percentage. And Ryan Rickow, I believe, the punter, would finish with 2,603 yards on 53 punts, and he averaged just over 49 yards a kick, so not too shabby for a punter. So yeah, again, very quick recap. Won't have to spend too much time on this. Obviously, the Bengals had a horrendous start. They were 4-8 heading into week number 13, or after week number 13. They would win out their last 5 games to at least finish above 500. But again, I've said this, and it's going to sound such a cliche, if you have to rely on other teams to lose just for you to get into the postseason, you're probably not doing your job. Your main focus should be on you and your game that you're playing. Again, if you're looking outside to other teams, are they beating the team that we need to beat, or whatever the case may be is, you're not doing yourself any justice in that at all. Again, had they got off to a better start, they could have easily finished with 10 wins, 11 wins, 12 wins on the season. They had a lot of close games, and evidently they came up short on a few of those games as well. So a very disappointing season for the Bengals, but don't really hang your head. Yes, it sucks missing the playoffs, but with that being said, I guarantee you'll be back next year. There's no way they're going to be 2 straight years when you have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase on your team, possibly T. Higgins if he resigns. Like, you have a lot of weapons, and Chase Brown on your back end. Like, you have a lot of weapons. You have a decent offensive line. Your defense is pretty okay. I mean, I didn't see a whole lot of categories where they were in the basement of a lot of those categories. So they have a very good team overall. Again, they just bad luck, bad timing, whatever you want to call it. Earlier in the season, it definitely plagued with how they fared out for the remainder of the schedule. So I'm going to say this right now. They'll be back in the playoffs. They could even be in the mix for the AFC North crown. Who knows? But I think between the Bengals and the Ravens, both of those teams are more than likely to make the postseason next year. All right, that's going to take care of this recap for the Cincinnati Bengals. As always, if you're new to this channel and you like this type of content, feel free to hit the sub button. I'd be very grateful and very appreciative. Until next time, and as always, take care.